I'd like to welcome Simon Taylor, who many of you will know. He's Head of Learning at Icon Gallery. And Simon, as I said earlier, has very kindly volunteered to chair the next panel, which is all about an international perspective. Our chair, John Reeves, unfortunately is unwell and can't be with us today. So thank you, Simon.
Thank you very much, Jane. It's a great privilege to fill in for John Reeve. And welcome to Exchange 2, Change in an International Context. So learning from practitioners' experience outside of the UK. And it's a great privilege to sit with international colleagues who have such a wealth of experience from very different contexts. To my left is Karen Groen, Director at Trapholt Museum of Modern Art and Design in Denmark. Alicia Siddiqat, Curator of Education at the Mumbai Museum in India. And Lica Juhász from the Museum of Fine Arts in Budapest in Hungary. So welcome to you all. And by way of introduction for this particular exchange, I wanted to share some thoughts from John Reeve on the theme of globalisation and really examining this idea of connecting the global and the local, which is something at ICON we're very keen to do with our own learning participation programme. So John says there is much loose talk about globalised culture and the world mission of major museums and galleries, but how much has really changed in our own practice? There has certainly been a far greater emphasis on world arts in, for example, the British Museum, the V&A, the Royal Academy and Tate, alongside many local initiatives and numerous festivals and seasons, but is this still a one-way street? How glocal are we now? This session looks outside the UK and asks what we can learn from experiences in Denmark, Hungary and India, from very different institutional and cultural contexts. An art and design museum in a small town, two very different kinds of art collection in a capital city undergoing enormous cultural change, and a museum originally established in 1855 as a treasure house of the decorative and industrial arts in what is now one of the world's largest cities. In each case, we will see what an individual with energy and vision can achieve in helping to initiate and sustain change, and ask what we can learn in our own context here in the UK. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, which is Lica Juhász from Museum of Fine Arts in Budapest. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon, for that nice introduction. I'd like to thank Engage for supporting my participation in the conference, and especially to Sarah and Miranda for inviting me to speak today. They've asked me to speak about the Green Garden Project, and specifically about how members of the museum education staff at the Museum of Fine Arts are able to initiate projects like this and hopefully take them through to fruition. And this building that you see in the slide, the white building on the left-hand side, actually holds a collection by Victor Vasarely. And in working with the collection, we tried to follow in Vasarely's footsteps. As an architect, he was very interested in changing the environment just by building and designing new buildings. And with shapes and colors, he felt that each of us, as members of whatever community we live in, that we could kind of use this alphabet that he dreamed up, different colored shapes, in order to transform the environment that we live in. And the project itself, this is the front entrance to the museum. And it's basically about turning this not too exciting green area, this rather ugly side to the entrance, and this also not very well kept green area, and just transforming it into something that is much more spiffy and kind of invites visitors into the Vasarely Museum itself. Now, the Vasarely Museum is actually not really a museum, although we all call it the Vasarely Museum, but it's actually a collection within the modern department at the Museum of Fine Arts. About 25 years ago, Vasarely, when he was living in Paris at the time, he gave a large body of his work to the Museum of Fine Arts in Budapest, and it became one collection in the modern collection. The museum has ancient Egypt, antiquities, old masters, old sculptures, graphics, and modern works. And because the building at that time wouldn't have been able to put on permanent display most of the works that were given, it was decided that they would be held in a building about 20 minutes by public transportation from the Museum of Fine Arts itself. And because it's a large national museum, one of the 14 national museums in Hungary, we have a huge staff, so members of our staff, over 300 permanent members, who are all helping the museum education department in order to go from point A to point B. So the first thing that I wanted to emphasize is that museum educators, even at the Vasarely, with the Vasarely collection or anything that we do, we're not working in isolation. We've got secretarial staff, financial department, photographers, graphic designers, maintenance people who can build furniture and do all kinds of amazing things. People, guys, strong guys who are moving the tables for us and everything, all kinds of help. And without them, it really would be very hard to go from point A to point B. So that's, I think, one thing that's very important. The second thing is some of you might be familiar with the big draw, especially since it's a lot of events probably have just happened in the UK in October. The big draw, there's a Hungarian big draw as well, been in Hungary for about 5 years. And since the museum's been running big draw events, and we run them in October, sometimes November as well, then as part of the Green Garden project, we just decided to have the kickoff as a big draw event. So we didn't need extra money or planning or whatever in order to have the kickoff, because we were going to do a big draw event anyway. So it's already part of our regular program that we have. And what we did in last year is to invite members of the public. They just got templates of the 2 green areas that I showed you, and I was standing at that doorway, and we talked about the 2 green areas on either side, and we just gave them a template, and there was some time where they could engage with the collection, and then we just asked them to just draw ideas that they had for the new green area. And we got all kinds of ideas. And we took these ideas and gave them to students who are studying landscape architecture at the university in Budapest. And this man who you see in the red sweater, he works at the university, and he had come to a program that we had kind of a big draw type program, although it was in January, and with his family. So he had just come as a member of the public, and it turned out that he worked at the university and that he taught landscape architecture, and I told him about my dream to have this Green Garden project, and he said, wow, by all means, if you ever get it off the ground, you should definitely contact me, and we'd be happy to help. So I contacted him, and he ran a special course for students I think in their last year of their bachelor's degree program, who were absolutely capable of creating designs and all the specifications needed for any gardener, professional gardener or landscape architect to actually implement them. And these students also came to the museum, and they got a list of parameters, some of which I've listed here. There are about 20 parameters, I think. And of course, their ideas also had to reflect Vasarhelyi's works of art, which were on display. And they also got those plans which you saw earlier. There was about 12 plans, I think, which came from the Big Draw event. And they had to incorporate them as well, or they were asked to take them into consideration. And they were told that the green areas will be maintained by volunteers. The museum has a lot of volunteers, and one of the volunteers has a lot of experience in gardening. She's actually retired, and she volunteered to be the volunteer green garden manager. So she would make sure that it was kept up, the 2 green areas, after the whole thing was installed. And we also wanted to have some sense of like a little community garden. So maybe we would have another Big Draw type event where people would get bulbs and seeds, and they would, in March or whatever, they would take them home and they would grow into seedlings on their windowsills, and then they would bring them back in May or June or whatever and plant them in a little area in the green garden. And so there had to be like a place for that in the plan. And often what happens in Budapest is that the green areas look very nice for about 8 months out of the year, but in the winter, they're just like soil. And I didn't really want it to be soil in the winter, so it had to somehow like look nice all year round. And we were working with a budget which was 200,000 Hungarian forints, which is about 570 pounds, which my net salary is 100,000 forints a month. So it kind of gives you an idea about how much money that is in the Hungarian economy. And this money, the reason why that was set as the budget is because the 3rd district, which is where the building actually is in Budapest, there's about 22 or 23 districts. They have adopt a green area grant application process that you can go through, and we had spoken to them, and they said that it was highly likely that we would be funded, and so we kind of put that as the budget, even though we hadn't yet applied for the funds when the university students got this task. So there were 8 plans which were given to the museum by the university students, and I'm just going to show you 3 of them now. You can see this person gave a lot more area for the community garden. And I'm not a gardener. I cook, actually, but I do a little bit of dance, but I don't garden. If I know what the weeds are, I'd be happy to pull them out for you. It's about the sum total of my gardening knowledge. My boyfriend tries to teach me the names of trees, but I'm not really even very good at remembering the names. And so basically, we needed someone who, would be able to revamp the 2 green areas and oversee it, a professional person. And back to the Big Draw again, I know Sue Ford, the founder of the Big Draw, and I told her that it seems I'll be speaking about the Big Draw more than about the Green Garden Project, but an organization contacted us in 2010 and asked us to do like a mini Big Draw in our big Draw. And they're the Climate Ambassador Association. And I kind of paraphrased from their homepage, but they develop these interactive community projects promoting environmental education and carbon-conscious sustainability. And it kind of seemed that we just, fit right into what they were doing. And basically, I was just calling everyone that I knew if they would be interested in working on this project together. And they were just like, okay, sure. Kind of my response when they had asked me originally, would I do this little Big Draw or whatever, like, why not? And one of the women who works for the Climate Embassy Association graduated from the landscape architecture department, and she volunteered to set it all up. And so it seemed like things were okay. We had plans, we had someone to implement it. We were going to upload the plans to our website, and so members of the general public could vote for which plan they wanted, and then whatever plan got the most votes, that was the one that was going to be installed. And we were ready to have our project where we would hand out seeds and bulbs and everything. And the maintenance department told me, just don't send this information out to anyone, Litsa. There's severe water damage happening to the building, and we have to dig up the 2 green areas. And so if you build your garden, then we'll just dig it up. And I was like, you guys are going to dig the green area up, so we won't have to pay for digging. That's great. Excellent. Thank you so much. And since you're going to dig it up, you're going to have to put something back afterwards. So maybe you could put our, green garden back. So the museum didn't have money in last year's budget in order to dig it up and fix the water problem. And so it's kind of been put on hold, and conceivably the water damage is going to be fixed between now and the spring, and then our project is going to resume its normal course of action from March. So in a way, we're going to end up benefiting from this 1-year gap in the project. And that's it.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd like to introduce Alicia Sadikot from the museum in Mumbai, India. Thank you, Alicia.
Hi, good afternoon. I'd like to thank Engage for the invitation to speak here and present our work at the Dr. Bhavdaji Lad Museum in Mumbai. Because I realize that Mumbai is quite far away, I'm just in order to introduce the museum and contextualize our current practice, I'm going to give you a very brief account of the museum's history and permanent collection. So the Dr. Bhavdaji Lad is Mumbai's oldest museum, and this present building opened in 1872 as the Victoria and Albert Museum, Bombay. Today, it is located in the bustling heart of central Mumbai, but at the time, it was actually planned at a distance from the city center, right next to the city's botanical garden and zoo, both of which still exist to the right of the building in the image in front of you. So together, the botanical garden, the zoo, and the museum form one of the busiest visitor attractions in the city. This is an interior view of the gallery. The building was built on public subscription by some of the leading citizens of the day, and it was built and dedicated to honor India's new queen, Victoria, and her consort, Prince Albert, who still occupies pride of place in our central gallery. Okay. So the museum's permanent collection showcases the fine and decorative arts of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This collection highlights early modern art practice and also the best examples of craftsmanship at the time. We have one of the most significant public collections of photographs, maps, manuscripts, and lithographs that document Bombay or Mumbai's rise to become the first city of India at the turn of the last century. We also have a collection of clay models and dioramas that documented and depicted lifestyles, occupation, culture in Mumbai specifically, as the slide shows you, but also India in general. Coming to slightly more recent history, post-independence in 1947, the museum was placed under the control of the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, and unfortunately suffered decades of institutional neglect. So by the early 2000s, the museum had fallen into an abject state of disrepair. At the time, the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, which is one of the leading NGOs, or the leading heritage conservation NGO in India, initiated a public-private partnership that aimed at the restoration and revitalization of the museum. This public-private partnership was based on a tripartite agreement between the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, which owned the museum, the Jamnalal Bajaj Foundation as private sponsors, and Intac itself, which was providing all the expertise. And what this agreement did was it established a museum trust. Now, in a country where even today the vast majority of museums are completely run, funded, staffed by the government, establishing an autonomous museum trust was a huge, huge deal and a big step forward, we believe. This is just to show you what the museum looked like in 2003. This is exterior views of the building. Over a period of 5 years, the museum building was entirely restored and restored to its original condition. Internally, apart from the actual restoration of the building, we also modernized lighting and display techniques. All the decorative details of the museum were restored, and almost 4,000 museum objects as well. At the time, rigorous research into the museum's history and collection resulted in the devising of a brand new curatorial strategy, sort of bringing the museum into the 21st century. And this project won the UNESCO 2005 Award of Excellence for Cultural Conservation. This is what the museum looks like today, and it reopened to the public in 2008. I was asked to elaborate on the structure of the Museum Trust. The Museum Trust continues to administer the museum. It was constituted for a period of 15 years with the opportunity to renew the agreement at that time. Each of the members or partners have representatives on the Museum Trust. In addition, we also have private individuals who are sort of experts in the field of heritage, culture, and art. So the municipal corporation continues to own the museum and its collections. It is also responsible for security. The municipal corporation contributed to the restoration. Really amazing is that they have provided us with a corpus fund which meets all capital expenditure, maintenance, and salaries even today. INTAC obviously executed the restoration project. It continues to work with us through a documentation center and a conservation lab, both on site, and we work in partnership with INTAC to run outreach programs. Finally, our private sponsors, they obviously sponsored the restoration project, and they continue to be very active members on our trust. They fund our postgraduate diploma program, and they also fund other exhibitions and learning programs. I'll just say that the museum director, she is the managing trustee, and she was the convener of INTAC at the time that INTAC initiated this whole public-private partnership. So it was she's the INTAC representative as well. The restoration project involved a redefining of the museum's mission, and today we are dedicated to excellence in cultural education. We aim to engage the community or communities of Mumbai and India and outside, and to promote cross-cultural understanding and cultural awareness. I think it's important to note here that Mumbai is a city that is severely lacking in public spaces for culture. We have 2 active dynamic museums, and we consider ourselves really lucky. We are talking about one of the biggest cities in the world, so it just helps you to understand the sort of scale that we're talking about. Okay. I'm going to run through a few of the programs of the museum now, but before I do, I just want to say that some of the features that actually contribute to how active the museum can be and how successful it is in engaging its communities is the fact that we have a very supportive trust, that we are functionally and financially autonomous, and that we are able to hire professional staff. So it isn't just government bureaucrats that are running that is running our institution. Another thing we can do is that we have the freedom to set and to meet our creative agenda, which again is quite unique in India. We are perhaps the only public museum that offers a platform to engage with cutting-edge contemporary art. Because our collection was constituted at a time when all those decorative arts were contemporary, we have taken this forward, and we work with established contemporary artists who engage with the collection, the museum's history, and the city in general to put up some amazing exhibitions. So we believe that not only do we offer the public a platform to engage with contemporary art, but also that we give artists the opportunity to show in an Indian museum. For each of our temporary exhibitions and based on our permanent collection, we run workshops. These workshops are conducted in at least 3 languages. We also conduct them for a range of audiences, whether they're school children or just families who want to do something extra. All our workshops for schools are free of charge. And I'll just say that through these, we want to sort of bridge the gap in cultural education in our government schools and NGOs. So one of our challenges, and I've been talking to a few people about this, is not that we have a hard time bringing schools into the museum, but that when they come in 200s and 300s. And so the challenge is actually getting them to think of it not just as a day out and a picnic, but come do something, come in 30s, 40s, I'll do even 60. But when you call me and say there are 300 students coming, it's a little challenging. We also run free tours every weekend in at least 3 languages for anyone who wants to attend them. Again, we're always looking for docents and volunteers because schools will pick a free tour to attend and then come with 400 students. And I'm not exaggerating, this really does happen. As someone said, other members of staff are constantly being pulled in to help me because the learning team is all of 2 of us. So yeah, we can't really handle big groups. Okay, for a more expert audience, we also offer the chance to sort of interact with artists, curators, and generally art critics, scholars, and art historians. We hold a weekly series of lectures every Saturday evening, completely free and open to anybody. And these lectures are where people are asked to basically present their latest research. Based on each of our exhibitions, we have curator and artist-led talks and walks as well. So it's basically whatever you're interested in, you're welcome to attend. We have a postgraduate diploma program, which is run only on weekends, and it's basically for working professionals. It includes gallery visits, workshops, and of course, lectures. But what's really interesting is that we have, each module is actually run by somebody else. So it's whoever the leading person is in that particular subject is invited to come and participate. And it's actually really a one-of-a-kind program. Okay, our idea is to have programs that appeal to a wide variety of people, whether it's students, it's families, art enthusiasts, or families who've gone to the zoo and want to come into the museum for a quick visit before they go home. And this is still, even today, the vast majority of our visitors. So what we try to do in a lot of our programs is actually work with other organizations. And this slide gives you an example of the kind of organizations we worked with in the past year alone. So currently on view, we have exhibition of photographs from the British Library. We work with the British Council, INEVA in London, the Goethe Institute, Zenyatt Public. If you saw that image of the big web on top of the museum, that was a public art installation that we did with them. One of the most challenging collaborations, I don't know if, I'm sure many of you have heard of the BMW Guggenheim Lab project, and I'll just talk a little bit about why this project was so challenging and interesting for us. Over the last winter, we presented the BMW Guggenheim Lab in Mumbai, along with both BMW and Guggenheim. The idea for this project was that this was a traveling laboratory that would travel to cities across the world and through programming and public discourse, consider urban challenges and also experiment with sort of creative solutions to the same. Their mandate was to talk to everybody. And in a city as diverse as Mumbai, that was quite a challenge. All our programs were completely free. If you look at the lab structure, this was specifically designed for Mumbai. And the idea, it was so open so that people could come in and leave at any time. So it was completely visitor-led, and they could stay for as long as they wanted, come back again, all of that. So not only did we present 6 weeks of programs at the museum itself, but also at off-site locations. We worked at 5 off-site locations as well as the lab for a period of 6 weeks. So it was just a completely crazy but amazing time. The programs looked at themes as varied as sustainability, green living, but also local popular culture and intangible heritages. The reason I talk about the Guggenheim Lab is because it just goes to show the kind of scale that our little museum with a very short staff has been able to do in the last year. In 2005, the Museum Trust established a formal partnership with the V&A, and the idea was to share expertise. We hosted 2 exhibitions from the V&A, and we've also had several lectures by V&A staff at the museum. Okay, I thought I was going to be running out of time, but, sorry. I've clearly blaze through that presentation. I want to end with our expansion plans. Last year, with the Guggenheim Lab, we opened a new area which was called the Museum Plaza. It's located directly behind the museum, and it consists of open space and sort of renovated 19th century structures that you can see in the images above. And our aim what we did was we doubled the space of the museum with the Museum Plaza, and our aim is now to focus on programs that look at arts other than the fine arts, so music, theater, film, anything to sort of diversify what we are able to offer as a cultural space and institution. Okay, this is just to show you some of our audience figures for the last year, and also the kind of diversity in audiences who walk into the museum. I cannot tell you the number of times that groups have walked in speaking a language that none of us at the museum can speak. And they're from India, they're just from a different part, and they've come to visit the city, gone to the zoo, and walked into the museum. Every weekend we have an average of 2,500. On holiday weekends it can go up to about 4,000. And again, we're a very small staff, so it's almost like we become policemen on weekends. But what we're really interested in is we have a really high number of school children and other visitors coming into the museum space. But what we're trying to gauge now is whether the numbers actually participating in our programs is rising. Because if school children come in 300s, that's a good number, but how much are they actually engaging with our collection? So that's a sort of count that we're now looking at. And finally, we're at the start of a really exciting project or phase in the museum's history. The MCGM, or the Municipal Corporation, has given us land behind the Museum Plaza to build a new museum building. And we believe that with this addition, we hope that, this process has already begun to sort of look for an architect to design that museum building. We believe that this validates the sort of activities of the trust, and we hope that with all this additional space, I don't know what we'll do with it, we're all really excited, but we hope that we can do even more for culture and the city of Mumbai in general. So, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Alicia. So I'd like to introduce Karen Groen, Director of the Trapholt Museum of Modern Art and Design in Denmark.
Went on. There it is. Thank you very much for inviting me over to talk about Trapholt, which might come from a small town in scale compared to England or Great Britain, but the museum is the 5th largest art museum in Denmark, and from an area close to Billund with Legoland, so we're in a hub of cities that you can compare with the 3rd largest city in Denmark. I've been asked to talk about how we have changed our organization because of radical cuts on our funding. So I'll focus on that. And I was thinking about how to make the title of this talk, because I tried to say how to change and stay the same, because we have to change if we want to have new audiences, but we also have to stay the same if we want to keep our core audience. So how do we work with that, and how do we change and expand the museum, and how do we make sustainable solutions is another question. And I profoundly believe that research-based practice is a core thing in order to change in sustainable ways, so that you don't just say, I think, I feel, my daughter is like that, my neighbor does, but that it is based on research. So that I'll come into these points during the talk. The museum is a destination, a beautiful site. People travel to come, and some find it as a place of contemplation, others find it as a place of joy. It's not in Copenhagen, 2 hours drive from Copenhagen, so that doesn't. The collection is with 5,500 pieces, art and design from 900 and forwards. So we have Danish modern, we have modern art, a wonderful collection, beautiful buildings. We have Arne Jacobsen Sommerhouse, a total installation of the famous Danish architect, where you can really experience and immerse with his architecture and design. We have a special focus on crossover between art and design. We had a cave exhibition in 2013. We'll have the Campana Brothers in 2014. Those will be our big special exhibitions that will pull in audiences from all over the country. We have 2,400 square meters, 6 to 8 big exhibitions every year, 4 areas for changing exhibitions. So it's quite a lot to do in this museum. Our vision is to be the most engaging, responsive, and accessible art and design museum in Denmark, with very good work with our collection, but also a welcoming museum. And inspired by Oldenburg's idea about a great good place, we say we will be an aesthetic place, a clever place, and a great good place. We are based in the lowest educated area of Denmark, so that is a challenge. How do you work with this audience that is different to the normal core audience in art museums? I find that is one of the most exciting things about being in this museum. The museum in numbers is that in 2010, when I became a director, after I was the 5th director in 4 years, we were 3 curators. I had been in the museum since 2001, and we were 3 curators, 1 in art and 1 in design and 1 in education. We had a cut of 10% of our core funding from the municipality, which meant a 5% cut on our total budget. Today we are 21 staff members, and the hierarchy of the curatorial hierarchy has been replaced by a team structure. And when I'm talking about the curatorial hierarchy, I'm talking about that we kind of had 3 columns, 3 people working with different areas, and because of maybe you have a lot of funding in England, but in the UK, but in Denmark we haven't got a lot of funding, so there was a lot of power fights for the resources. So there were the different curators. Actually, the one who was the best friend with the workshop would have the best work with them, and the others would not have the same, and so on. By changing the structure of curators, another thing about curators is that curators are good at art or good at what we know about, but maybe not good producers. So the funny thing in our museum was that the curators were responsible, of course, for the research, but also for producing and for education and marketing, and they actually didn't know anything professionally about that. So I found that was a problem too. So we created a team structure, which I'll tell you about. The result of the changes has been that we have grown, we have 30% more visitors now, and we have also grown our funding through external funding. So, what is a curatorial team? Well, we didn't have much money, so we had to think of which kind of, what kind of people would we need in order to create this museum with this great vision of being the most responsive and exciting museum in Denmark? Well, we need an audience development manager, so we made a 4th position on that. A communication manager to do our communication, collection manager, of course. Beforehand, the collection was not really taken care of because people were so busy doing things they were not good at, so they could not really take well care of the collection. A producer full position, a new kind of position in Denmark, and I'm the director. I'm responsible for the concepts in the house. So, audience development manager, she does schools, events, special projects, and development. Our communication manager, she analyzes who are the stakeholders, she makes partnerships, she hasn't got any money, so she has to do all her communication through free cooperations with whoever she can be interested in the museum and to do cooperations with. In the moment we have an exhibition that's called Out to Sea, about pollution in the oceans, and we have a cooperation with the biggest dairy company in Denmark, Arla Foods, so we are on their milk in these 6 weeks, telling about pollution and this plastic on the top of the milk, and people should come and bring the plastic bottoms to the museum, and then the museum is mentioned on these milk, those kind of corporations. The producer, of course, she produces everything professionally, she knows everything about producing, she's an architect, and she's just one of the keys to the success of the museum, because now we have professional processes in the museum, and the knowledge has to be done before we do the exhibition. You can't do it during the exhibition, so things are in a better process now. And the collection manager, she makes sure that everything is handled correctly, and looked after and brought up and down and secured. And I'm the director, and I'm just responsible for the concepts. Research, I find, is one of the core, the core solutions to bringing the museum on the other side of doing what we always did, or what I feel. And we have two kinds of research in the museum. Research in the collection, of course, and research in our audience development. It is all based on its external funding, and these 80% positions are through external funding then made into full positions, and our audience development manager, she actually makes more positions because she gets more funding than she can use so that she can hire in more people. So this is the way we do our research. Research was not done in this museum beforehand. Again, I don't know, we were in full positions, people just really didn't get around to work with research. But now, through having 8 wanting to have full position, people are all the time working on making new projects, new research projects, new ideas, new developments. So this has meant that we've gone from being a sleeping museum to be a very innovative museum. We have just started a big project together with National Gallery, National Library, and the Medical Museum in Copenhagen and Traphold. It's a big research program about about research in interpretation in order to create sustainable solutions, so that we don't make this week's program for a group with special funding, and afterwards we forget everything about them. And then another group, and then we forget about them. But that we can create some research that can change the museums profoundly. In our museum, the education department has always been the the development department. Through projects there, we have learned things that we have then transformed into the museum, and then we change the museum through the knowledge we get through our educational department. So this is from where we started up last week we started up the research group. Now the vision is to be the most engaging, responsive and accessible art museum in Denmark, and we think we should be an aesthetic place, clever place, great good place. So, but we want to keep our core audience, and they don't necessarily want to engage a lot. So how do we do that? We do know who they are, so we have to keep what they would like to have in the museum. At the same time, who else could come? How could we develop the museum? Ethnic groups, social groups, young people. But why should they come if we are in a way that they dislike? We have researched over the years about our audiences. In 2006, I got a research fellowship and to investigate in this. And we found out that if we put through a big research, we found out that 20% of our audiences are object-focused and hands-off. Cultivated, we call them. They don't want to touch, they just want to be cultivated. They know about art, they want to see art. 25% are what we call scanners, browsers. They're just there to be in a great place, look at other people, they're with friends, they're just having a great day. 25% are hands-on. They're investigators. They're really interested in our objects, and they want to read and learn and try everything we have. And then we have the socializers. They're there for the social reason, and everything they can touch and do, they'll do. And when you ask them, did you learn anything, they'll say, oh, no, what was it actually about? But maybe 2 weeks later, they'll get something. Who says that we learn only at the time that we see something? Later we know and learn things. We also looked at Marilyn Hood's framework about what do audiences like, or what do people do in their leisure time. And we know from our audiences that they like to be related with other people in social interaction. They like to feel self-acceptance and autonomy, feeling comfortable and at ease with others, with the surroundings. We also know that they like to feel competent and to be challenged. And we also know that Danes don't want to learn. They don't want to learn. Very bad. And that might be due to bad school education in museums. They actually very often refer to horrible experiences as a child with school in the museum. Of course, we're inspired by the Constructivist Museum by George Hine that you all probably know, that people, we can say whatever we want, but they do whatever they want to do themselves when they're in a museum. We're also inspired by Pine and Gilmore's experience economy, and actually we've discussed with George Hine that you can resemble the things from experience economy with his learning theory. And what Pine and Gilmore says is that people want to immerse, they want to engage, they want to dig into the things, and you can very much resemble that with the Constructivist Museum by George Hine. So, what have we then done concretely in this museum with all this knowledge we have about audiences? In 2001, we made a big project called Curator for a Day, where we let our audiences curate. Later, we made the interactive gallery where we had our paintings, and then we had our handling collection of chairs, and people could just change the position of chairs in front of the paintings and experience how much the context means for the experience of a thing. Then we made Arbiters of Taste, where we let the audience judge, vote, what is good design. Big project. What about art? Is an exhibition where we then had 200 pieces from the collection up, and they could again curate, but this time not with the pieces themselves. We made these small templates where they could put pictures of what they chose, and every week we made a weekly exhibition, who was the best suggestion for a curatorial for an exhibition. Very demanding project it was. We have also made evaluations, and we know we have compared ordinary exhibitions with more interactive exhibitions, and we have found that the audience really, really love it. They just love being challenged. So, look at these people. It's a very sad sight. What motivated them to come? Actually, this was one of our promotional pictures beforehand. I was like, why are we having this picture there? They're not having fun, are they? So, I always said we need to make ourselves invisible. The best aim is that we are not necessary. They are there to be together. So we look at intrinsic motivation. Ryan and Dietschy's ideas about what is a motivation and what is intrinsic motivation. They say competence, relatedness, and autonomy are core things in being intrinsically motivated. And then they go from motivation towards intrinsic motivation. I only have a few minutes left, so I'll just give you this as an inspiration, as a way of thinking and working in your work. We're also looking at Riff's scales of psychological well-being, because really, what do we really want? We want people to feel well when they're in a museum. They want to feel competent and amused and inspired, but people are inspired in different ways. People are not the same. So we're really digging into this in the moment with our research. Going back to Marilyn Hood, that is exactly what her research from '82 in Toledo, Ohio said, that people want a relatedness, acceptance, autonomy, and competence. These are not news, but this is just using the psychological theory in understanding it. We've made many projects. Here we have New Danes telling about their culture through our collection. Again, this time we chose some specific groups to curate with. These are then empowered participants, and they came and made some amazing projects. Bridging the Youth, where we contacted youth that had left the school system and dropouts to see whether we could use this method of curating with the audience to make them more self-aware. We also, in the moment, are working with people who have stress and are ill because of that, and cooperating with our municipality. So we used our curatorial work with ordinary audiences, and we curated paintings later with the template. Now we have tried our method on special groups, and they have all responded really, really amazingly on the projects. And our next project is next November to make curating as a permanent concept for an exhibition for the museum in November 2014. Now you have to understand that when we do these things, it has to be something that people who dislike education or anything interpretational it has to be so beautiful and wonderful that they can leave it out. So it will be for the 50% who like to engage, and not for the 50% who dislike it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Well, it's three radically different approaches and some three very different contexts. But there seems to me there are several interrelated strands that we can look at in more detail. And one, I think, is how do you reconfigure an organisation in the face of cuts and, as Karen said, find sustainable solutions. Managing with smaller or diminishing resources, and then looking at new models for public and private partnerships to sustain museums and galleries with reduced government subsidy. So we could look at those in more detail. And Karen, I wanted to return to your quite radical kind of reorganisation that you've undergone and these new roles that you've created where you have producers rather than curators, and it seems that the gallery educator role has changed. And is it more of a development role or audience development and finding out the motivations for the visitors? And using this research-based practice, I think that's a really valuable approach. So could you expand on how the roles have changed within your organisation?
They have radically changed, and some of the challenges has actually been to find the right people to be in the house. So we had an educator who had been in the house in my department for some years, and she became the audience development manager. And by bringing her into the team, she had to learn that she has a very profound voice in developing exhibitions. And she's a very, she's a very quiet person. She doesn't like to make a lot out of herself. So she really has to learn to take the power. The same with our communication manager. She has to learn that she's empowered and that she can give in new knowledge that might change our exhibition, that we need an area for the audience to be together, or we might need an area for the stakeholders to be present with leaflets or whatever. The producer is a core function because she just hasn't got any meanings. She doesn't mean anything. She just means that the process has to be right. So she's not with one or the other. The collection manager has been a really difficult position to put in the right person. We have tried 3 persons because our museum world, we give birth to the same people as we were yesterday. So everybody have been somewhere in a museum where they learned that a curator does this and that. And then when they come into our museum and a curator doesn't do this and that, and they see themselves because they are working with the collection, so they're a bit more important. And actually, I have found in our museum that it has always been the people working with education who were better with the collection than the curators, because they were always doing special exhibitions and not really interested in the collection. So we had really big challenges getting the right person who we've got now. Mm-hmm. And she has to take care of all the handling. And then I have to do the funding and the concept. But the thing is that we meet together and then we discuss, everybody discusses what is this exhibition about, what is this research project about, why is it important, what is the core question, what are we questioning with this exhibition. So now we've started all our exhibitions with a question. We made an exhibition with the Queen, and with that we brought in external research because, we can't do everything. So we had a researcher in who had done research on paintings made of the Queen. So we borrowed all these paintings. It was really a good exhibition. And the question was, is it the Majesty or the person we are seeing? Is it the private or the public person? Because the Danish Queen likes to be painted as if she's very normal. You wouldn't know it is the Queen if you didn't know it in advance. So it's really interesting that she likes to be so normal, because normal is the best you can be in Denmark. If I say, oh, she's really normal, then I really said that she's something special. So being normal is so that was the question. So when we opened the exhibition, that was the question on the door: is it the private or the public person we see? So through this work, we are all in the process. I have to say it's really demanding because some people are not used to taking the power and being empowered, and others have been used to be having the power. But right now, it's really a good team, so it needs the right people.
That's really interesting. And Lisa, looking at your Green Garden project, were there any particular questions you were trying to address, or were you trying to raise a profile of a particular issue that was important for you at at the Museum of Fine Arts?
Yeah, I guess I've been thinking about, since they asked me to speak about this project, how do I get around just saying that it's ugly? But I mean, that's like, honestly, that's what inspired the whole thing. When I go to this building to run sessions or plan them, I just pass by something that's, in my opinion, just really ugly. And I just wanted to make it more beautiful. I mean, basically, it came down to that. And I thought, well, I mean, I know myself, I know what my strengths and my weaknesses are, talking about finding the right people for the right tasks, so that hopefully I could inspire those people who have ideas, who want to also make this area where they live, if we're talking about the very, very local community, or university students. We often talk about there are young people who need opportunities to, make a difference in the place where they live. So we have to provide them with real tasks and possibilities to work or whatever. And so this would be an excellent, task for university students and things like that. I guess it just came down to wanting to inspire people, as Vasarely wanted to inspire people. So always going back to the collection itself, and just revamp something that was an eyesore in a way. Yeah.
Now, Alicia, looking at your experience at Mumbai, I mean, you've been in a very large organisation, but it's undergone a huge period of transformation and change. And I wanted to look at this interesting model that you talked about, the public and private partnership. And perhaps you'd like to talk in more detail about the challenges with that, the opportunities, and what doors it's opened up for you as an organisation.
I think it's more opportunities than challenges.
Okay.
As I said, I have to talk a little bit about museums in general, I think, for anyone to understand how path-breaking this sort of partnership actually was. So all our cultural institutions are actually funded, run, staffed by the government, and there isn't a lot of expertise, there isn't a lot of training. Most of our museums are run by bureaucrats who are there for 2 years. At the moment, our 3 big national museums can't get directors, not because there aren't people there with the expertise, it's just because they wouldn't have the autonomy to actually do anything. Again, it's very short-term contracts, so why would anyone put themselves through that, deal with the bureaucracy, not really be able to achieve anything? There are any number of articles that have been written on this, the fact that the National Museum of India cannot hire a director. So I think what this public-private partnership did for us was open all sorts of doors. Hats off to the municipal corporation who are actually agreeing to go into this. They are still owners, they still run the security, so they are actually, they are still invested in the trust. They're very much a part of the museum. We have an executive committee, we have trust meetings, so it's not like we're running around doing things on our own, obviously. But for them to say that, okay, set up this trust, go out there and hire people who are professionally trained, who can actually do this and do it well. And what they've done for the city, I think, is quite incredible. As a trust, we are, personally speaking, it's probably the most exciting museum in the country, so it's a great place to work. It's manic on any given day. We're doing 10 different projects. And you said large organization, we're one of the largest museums in the city, but we have a total staff, including admin, management, gallery staff, housekeeping, which is about 50. So curatorial, we're 7 of us, and that includes education and marketing and everything. So we're all kind of helping each other. But just coming back to that, the ability of the trust to actually be autonomous functionally and financially, to go out there and come up with projects and then actually execute them in a timely fashion, it's more opportunities than obstacles, I think. Yeah.
And in terms of your international collaborations, I'm interested to know more about, the links with the V&A, but we also mentioned BMW, Guggenheim. And could you explain the role of the British Council in India and how you've linked with them? And maybe this is a good opportunity to bring in Sam Guha, who represents the British Council in India, because that's a really interesting link, and it's something ICON are interested in pursuing with our links with Karachi in Pakistan and the British Council there.
I think I'll leave the British Council role to Sam. We did do a big exhibition with the British Council. So Homelands, which was British contemporary artists, was showcased at the Bhawdaji Lab Museum. And it's actually incredible to see the reactions of our audiences to cutting-edge contemporary art from England. And the sort of links that they were able to draw was quite incredible. But I think there are museums that are looking to collaborate with Indian museums, and we are one of the spaces that is able to build these collaborations with them. So for the V&A, because we were the V&A in Bombay, we set up a private trust, a formal partnership. And I'll be honest, this was before I was part of the museum. So I've only heard about this, but the 2 exhibitions that came, we've also had staff members from the museum come to the V&A and train in various, in conservation and in exhibitions. So that was a really good way of sort of rebuilding that partnership that was there initially. And we were also the V&A before the V&A in London. So if anyone's looking at the dates. So yeah. And just, I mean, again, the Guggenheim Lab project, I did go into a little bit of detail, but this was the first time that the lab was traveling to a non-Western city. So even for the Guggenheim Museum, negotiating and sort of considering what to do in Bombay was hugely challenging. And I think for them, they required an institutional partner like us to actually achieve that. It wasn't, I mean, they weren't always looking for an institutional partners, but I think that was the only way it could have worked because of our links with the communities and our knowledge of the city and so on. So I think what's interesting about the collaborations is that we give as good as we get, in a sense, and that works in various projects and ways. I hope I've answered your question. Yeah. I don't know.
Thank you. But can I pick up on that point about the staff development that seems to be happening there, which is sharing expertise with colleagues from the UK and India. And is there more opportunity to develop that, do you think?
I'm sure. I mean, not just with us, but the Ministry of Culture in India has actually formulated a partnership with the big museums in England, so the British Museum, the V&A, and I think one more, the British Library, to train staff in India, and not just in, in all museums, big and small. So that's a huge step forward. And coming from the Ministry of Culture, that's very positive. So there's a lot of talk of training and sort of exchange and expertise between, and what we can learn from museums here.
Could we, Karen, maybe continue this theme of staff training, and what's your approach, and how is it different maybe from a municipal gallery or museum?
I don't know how it's different, but I can say that there's a lot of training that we have this principle of people also always go 2 persons whenever they go for training, so that we're sure that they don't go and then they come back and nobody else knows about it. So to ensure that it will be put into the house, they always of 2 persons. They are all trained in audience knowledge and audiences in general, to an extent that I could say that they're quite capable educators, all of them now, or at least with knowledge about that area. And I think that common language is a part of the success of the team, because they understand that audiences are not your audiences, that they are different and there are different approaches. And yes, there's also collection focus in that, because that is also a part of the audience interest. Half of the audience are very, very interested in the collections. So we should never leave that as a core function. And I would say that the training has been to an extent that today the DNA is really strong. And we have now formalized with each other that we want to put more focus into the collection, because we are so sure about the understanding of education. So I think that is a core thing in the museum, and that makes it different to other museums, but also to how they acknowledge each other. Because if you have to acknowledge the audience, you can also use that towards each other.
That's fascinating. And Lisa, I'd be interested to hear from you. You mentioned the big draw and how you've translated an initiative originally from the UK into the context of Hungary. And are there initiatives from Hungary that you think would do well to be transferred across to the UK and elsewhere? And is there opportunities, do you think, for you to share the interesting practice that you're developing?
Honestly, I mean, the answer is honestly, I just don't know, like right at the top of my head. I would say that most of what I know about gallery education, actually, I learned here in the UK. I'm American, and I moved to Hungary about 19 years ago. And I slowly, I mean, all the things I think that I mentioned today, you know, you would find in various museums and collections and gallery education here in the UK. And that's why I was a bit skeptical if I could actually contribute anything that, you know, would be meaningful for professionals working here. I think that possibly with the new technologies, I mean, the whole digital age, which is coming out now. So I think there's a lot of people who are probably experimenting in all kinds of different avenues and trying out different things. And I can certainly imagine that colleagues in Hungary would maybe come up with a solution that might be good for other institutions. I don't necessarily know if it would necessarily be good for institutions in the UK. I mean, we were briefly talking about having a big draw, you know, with Skype and things like that, and I said, well, we don't have Wi-Fi in our museum, so it might not be possible. But some university students at the Technical University in Hungary are trying to figure out a way to get around Wi-Fi. So if a large institution like the museum can't afford to put Wi-Fi in, what are the alternatives to that? And so we might actually be able, I mean, Hungary, the innovation that's going on in Hungary, it might be good for, not necessarily for the UK, which has I mean, it's honestly, they just have more money than Hungary does, and therefore some of the technical problems that we come in contact with maybe don't necessarily exist here anymore. But I can definitely say that collaboration internationally is, you know, could happen. But I can't pinpoint, let's say, an exact project which could be adapted here.
Karen, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, I was just thinking about your question about education. An idea that could be transformed into an English UK context is that in our museum, twice a year, we have a day we call Knowledge Day. And on that day, all the people on the curatorial team deliver the newest knowledge that they are researching in or doing or practicing or cooperating on, so that the entire organization, meaning people from cleaning to workshop to shop to cafe, they are aware of what is, how is the DNA of the museum changing in the moment. And those two workshops are really, really important because there we gather everybody and we get this common language developed. So I thought that is an idea which is easy to pick if you can convince your director.
And that's a whole organisation
Yes.
approach.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yes, Lisa?
Yeah, just sometimes my brain comes up with the answer a bit later. I was talking with Sue Grayson Ford yesterday about other projects that I'm involved in, and the Green Guard project as well. And she says, well, but don't you have, I don't know what you call, none of the words are coming to my mind, but things that you have to fulfill. So you have to meet, you know, these target populations, or you have to increase the number of visitors by so many, or what do you call these?
Outcomes,
Outcomes,
criteria.
yeah. So, and I was like, yeah, they haven't come to Hungary yet. So we don't have any of those. You have annual review. No one reviews me annual. You have like targets, that's the word I'm looking for.
Wow.
So the fact of the matter is like, yeah, we're pretty free, and we could just, like, I have this idea, I want to do the Green Garden Project. And they're like, okay, do the Green Garden Project, just whatever. So the other thing is that, I mean, I'm sure it's great to have like strategies and targets, and, you know, we want to get from, you know, nationally or whatever in an institution, but sometimes you just need, as the speaker said in the earlier in the previous panel, you just need freedom just to explore, you know, opportunities. And so maybe you might want to put some of these targets away if possible for 6 months.
Well, before I move to Hungary, we've got 10 minutes for questions from the floor. Do we have a microphone? Should we start here? Thank you. Do we have a roving microphone? There's a lady here with the brown top. Thanks.
Thank you. Ooh, it's very loud. My question was to...
Could you introduce yourself?
Sorry, yeah. My name's Sophie Powell. I'm the learning manager at Impressions Gallery, which is a gallery in Bradford. My question was to Litsa. In terms of educationally, the Green Garden Project doesn't appear to be a traditional education project in terms of how we would view it in the UK. But it does seem to be a really strong participatory project. And my question was, do you approach educational projects in a much more participatory way rather than a kind of knowledge exchange, which is sort of the way that we would approach it here in England? Or in the UK as a whole, speaking to Scotland and Wales.
Yeah, I mean, we do things that are completely traditional. This is probably, part of it is that the scope of the museum can be outside the building itself, so that there are off-site programs and you can take things off-site. But the other thing is, I don't remember who introduced this idea or where I heard it, but that the museum is actually should think about just the environment that it's in, so what's outside its front door as well. And with regards to the local community, the fact that if it's just like a building in the local community, or if it's a part of the local community itself. So I think I was just trying to kind of create a soup in a way. So we've got like a big draw event, and we've got this gardening, sore eye problem, and we've got volunteers, and we've got all these elements or whatever. And I was trying to just put them all together, and maybe not have such an isolated approach to what we were doing. And so yeah, it was just kind of, I don't think we have many other examples of projects like this necessarily, but yeah, we were so far we've been able to kind of work with the community. We've been able to work with other educational institutions, have more volunteers involved, and hopefully we'll actually have a new beautiful garden.
Thank you. Can we bring in Sam Guha from the British Council in India? Just here, thank you.
Hi, I was listening to the presentation, and I think a very valid point by Karen, by you, and what the Indian museum sector is missing, but barring Bhauda Jilad maybe, is that it seems to me you are a listening museum. You want to listen to people and then shape yourselves. Whereas the Indian museums, and there are 700 museums in India, most of them government, few private, some family, and other kind of museums, but none of them want to listen to people. And that's why, and that's how the British Council got involved, because they overheard a conversation, which is actually I overheard a conversation, saying that we are returning 6 crores rupees to the government because we don't know what to do with the programming. And I thought, oh my God, here all of us want funds and want to do things, and these people don't know what to do with it. And we stepped in and we started facilitating those trainings and all. But despite that, I think an institution is led by its director, and all of them, if they close doors and if they don't listen to people, and they won't develop. I mean, Alisha's director sits through all workshops which her staff attends. Staff is being trained, but the director sits behind and listens to all the session and never goes back. Whereas in the case of other directors, and I've seen government museum directors, they just come for the opening because they get the press is there and the photo opportunities are there and the big shots are there, and they leave immediately after. They have no interest whether the staff is trained. And again, whether they have no interest. I tell the Victoria Memorial, which has the highest footfall in the country, about 10,000 every day, that 5,000 people are romancing in your gardens, but no one is coming inside the museum and the monument. What are you doing about it? No, he's just batting an eyelid. He can't care a fake, whether they're not coming in. But as long as they're coming inside the compound, he can tick the figures that I've got so much million in a year. I feel, and Alicia, just support me in that, I think we're not listening to the people, and that's why our museums are not developing as much as we would like to.
Thank you, Sam. Any more questions from the floor? There's a lady, Liz, with the orange cardigan. Thanks.
Hi, Liz Porter here. It's really actually kind of I'm mulling an observation that from the first session to this session, I was quite interested in the research that you've done around audiences and how they engage in your, your venue. I know there's loads of kind of different kinds of researchers out there, but actually I don't know where to find some of them. But I'm just wondering whether there is anything that we could signpost schools to look at with this new national curriculum around the research that has been done around how audiences engage with the arts and how they interact and where they're not, because I'm just wondering how this might interrelate with different learning styles. And I haven't really formulated what I'm trying to say, but I think there might be some nugget in there, I hope.
Thank you, Liz. Do the panel want to respond?
Yeah, I would like
Karen,
to respond.
yeah.
I definitely think that the school should look at intrinsic motivation, because it is really sad if the kids feel that they come into houses, powerful houses with rules that they cannot relate to. I think it's a great misunderstanding, thinking that all children like to engage. In our house, we have these 4 characters, and we know that we never talk about children or youth education, because we know some youth like to engage with the art, and others want more to engage with each other. So these 4 characters are both among old people, young people, normal people, weird people. And it's acknowledging that people are people and not groups. And then using the framework of intrinsic motivation, I would strongly recommend that you look at that, because that is also acknowledging that there are 2 professionals meeting each other. One is professional in knowing about art, and another is professional about knowing about themselves. And this is a meeting between these 2 professionals that should work. So I think, and I find that this framework of intrinsic motivation and psychological well-being are very good at understanding what should we then do to who, when. So I would strongly recommend that.
Thank you, Karen. I think we've got time for 2 more questions from the floor. There's a gentleman at the back there.
Mark Gibbs, one of the learning officers at Tully House Museum. It's a city art gallery in Carlisle. Question particularly to Karen, but to all of the panel. Karen, you had this amazing change in the way your museum was managed. And how did you, and the whole concept behind the museum, how did you persuade that change, or who persuaded that change to happen? Because you had 3 curators, and I imagine they might not have been too keen to have lost their jobs or to have it changed. How did that process happen?
My luck was that my museum was in a mess. And we had several directors in very few years. And I think 2 days before we had one director who was then, while she was on maternity leave, I was then running the museum, and then the board, they, sacked her. They asked her to leave the museum. What do you call that? Sacked, yeah. So the museum didn't have any director, and I was, by the way, pregnant myself. And I think it was the day before my delivery date, the last curator came in and gave her notice. And so I had, luckily I always go overdue, what do you call it, when I'm pregnant. So I had 4 days to get another person in, because I knew the museum would be without curators and without director when I delivered the baby. And then 2 weeks after, I was back in the office, because there was nobody to run the museum. So I had an empty museum. I had a person in to, a substitute in for the curator, a person I could call and say, could you come and help me? So I didn't have to ask anybody to leave, but the person who came and helped me, I felt obliged to give the position as a collection manager. And we had to say goodbye to each other after half a year because she could not understand the change. But luckily she got another position in a more ordinary museum instead. She's a nice and competent person, but just not for the position that we had. But I felt that I had to hire her because she had really saved the museum while I had the space. Yeah, you can hear it was a bit of a mess. So it was easy for me because I wanted to make this change. I knew that all the way. It had become more and more clear for me through the one director and the other that what was wrong was not necessarily the directors, but the way we were organized.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. We've got time for one more question. So a final question to the panel. Lady here, just in front, thanks.
Hi, I'm Sarah Campbell. I work at the V&A, the other one. It's an observation, I hope it's helpful. I've been so impressed by all three of your talks, and what keeps coming to mind is collaboration, having the right people together and respecting that you have one aspect of that, and you respect the other skills that are in the room. And if those skills aren't in the room, knowing who to contact so that they are. And I think that's just really encouraging. After this morning, the impact of the government and those changes, which are very divisive and puts us in a position where it feels quite combative. And I don't think it has to be. I think there's nothing like having a common enemy to unite people. So I think the arts world and the world of teachers we want to do the same things, which is get around the stuff that's getting in the way. So that's not really a question, but I suppose how deliberately do you incorporate the collaborative practice into how you work, either within your organisation or with partner organisations?
Alicia, do you want to come in on that?
Okay, so I'm not going to directly answer that question. A lot of our decisions are made by our director, and if my presentation has proved anything, is she's a woman of incredible foresight, especially within the environment that she works. But what we find is that, and what I find contrasting with what's happening here, is that there's very little local collaboration. There's very little other institutions or museums that we can locally collaborate with. So in a sense, the fact that we're able to look outside and look for people who have the expertise that is lacking is something that allows us to do big-scale projects and challenging projects that otherwise might not have been possible. But I think whether it's other galleries that are private spaces and represent artists that we want to show, or other museums, we are always looking for partners, because I think that makes what we offer more exciting and on a much larger scale.
Thank you, Alicia. I think we need to draw this section to a close. So I just wanted to sum up with a few of my own thoughts. For me, what's come through strongly is the importance of the responsive museum, the listening museum, to quote Sam Guha. And it seems to be the key things about collaboration and leadership in the sector, which could be from directors, but it could also be from gallery educators when they're led by an audience development focus with research-based practice and truly understanding the motivations of their audiences and why they're coming to the gallery. So just remains for me to thank the panel, to Karen Groen, Alicia Sadiqat and Litsa Juhas. So thank you very much.